She kicked me off my own porch, so I kicked her HOA empire off a cliff. HOA Karen kicked me off my porch, but didn't know I owned the land her pool sits on. Part 1. The porch, the coffee, and the glittering disaster in leopard print. Some Sunday mornings, all a man really wants is a cup of strong coffee, a quiet porch, and maybe a dense, boring manuscript about water drainage. But that morning, instead of birdsong and peace, I got a woman in leopard print leggings, glitter on her cheeks, and a voice so shrill it could peel the bark off pine trees. She didn't knock. She didn't hesitate. She just stomped up my porch like she owned the mountain and screamed, "You don't get to sit here anymore." Excuse me? Now for context. That porch, the one she was yelling on, it's been in my family since 1914, hand-built by my great-grandfather, and I was pretty sure still legally mine. But hey, keep listening. This story's ending? Oh. It's going to make you want to raise your coffee mug and salute. My name's Theodore Harrington, but folks around Pinewood Valley just call me Ted. 3 years ago, I lost the love of my life, my wife, Emily, to cancer. Since then, I've lived alone in this old cedar cabin tucked into the Colorado pines. It's not fancy. The wood's silvered with age, the porch railings are hand-carved and slightly crooked. But it's home. Emily and I used to sit there every single morning. Matching mugs. Hers had blue flowers, mine had a chip in the handle. She wouldn't let me throw it away. Said it still worked just fine. We planned our retirement out there. Talked about gardens, watched deer wander to the salt lick, counted how many times the wind chimes sang. She used to say it felt like a fairy tale. And honestly, she wasn't wrong. Sun filtering through the trees, the smell of pine and creek water, the mountains watching in silence. That porch held decades of love and peace. Until 6 months ago, when Vivian Rosewood showed up next door. She and her husband built a mansion, and I don't use that word lightly. It came with a rainbow-lit, waterfall-blasting, $800,000 swimming pool that runs 24 hours a day. They paved over half the lot to fit it. Suddenly, my quiet mountain life turned into a construction zone. But it wasn't the noise that tipped the scale. It was Vivian Rosewood, president of the HOA, or as I like to call her, the walking clipboard in stilettos. She's 35, always in sequin crop tops, even at 8 a.m., and wears sunglasses big enough to catch satellite signals. She drives a red Maserati, parks across 2 spaces like it's her birthright, and talks to delivery guys like they're goldfish with amnesia. And that morning, she decided my porch, my sanctuary, was no longer aesthetic enough for her HOA vision. I looked up from my manuscript. I was reviewing technical edits on water sustainability, and said, "Mrs. Rosewood, this cabin has been in my family over a century. It's fully compliant with every local code." She laughed, sharp and brittle, like breaking a wine glass in your hand. Then she tapped her red talons on my railing, the one my great-grandfather carved with a pocket knife, and said, "Every problem has a price tag, Mr. Harrington, even sentimental ones. I'll pay you triple. Just pack up and leave." I smiled politely. Emily always said I had a way of disarming angry people with my calm. But Vivian? She didn't calm down. She shifted. Those bug-eye sunglasses turned toward me like targeting systems. Her voice dropped to a hiss. "Then you're about to find out how uncomfortable I can make life here." And just like that, she turned on her heels, stomped back to her Maserati, and vanished in a cloud of perfume and gravel dust. I sat there. Coffee, gone cold. Manuscript forgotten. Heart pounding. Then, I opened the old leather notebook Emily gave me on our 15th anniversary. I flipped to the first page, wrote in pencil, slow and deliberate. Day 1. She has no idea who she's messing with. And then, I stood up, walked inside, and opened the drawer that held the one thing Vivian Rosewood didn't know existed, a thick, handwritten file, labeled Property Deed, Harrington Estate, 1914 to present. Part 2. The File, the Threat, and the Silence Before the Storm. The file was thick, yellowed with age, handwritten notes from 4 generations of Harringtons, all tied to this land. Maps drawn in ink, tax records from a century ago, letters between surveyors and the county office, all neatly preserved. Emily used to call it our ace in the cabin. Back when the HOA first started making noise about aesthetics and upgrades, she told me, one day, someone will try to erase our history. When they do, hand them facts and make sure they choke on them. I smiled at the memory, then flipped to the original deed, signed in 1914 by my great-grandfather Patrick Harrington, right next to a survey map that clearly outlined every inch of the property, including the land Vivian Rosewood thought she owned. I ran my fingers along the inked line, the one that traced the back corner of her new pool, and I whispered to no one in particular. She built it on my land. The next few days, they weren't quiet. Vivian turned up the heat, fast. It started with parties, not just barbecues or casual get-togethers. I'm talking DJ booths, laser lights, bass so loud it shook dust from my rafters, every Tuesday, Friday, and Sunday night, like clockwork. The music blasted until 2 in the morning. My cabin windows rattled with every beat. Sleep? Impossible. Then came the landscapers. Every Saturday and Sunday, 6 a.m. sharp, gas-powered mowers, leaf blowers, and trimmers, all roaring right outside my bedroom. It wasn't landscaping, it was warfare, disguised as lawn care. Still, I held my ground. Politely, quietly, like Emily would have wanted. But the peace didn't last long. She reported my wood-burning fireplace to the HOA, claimed it was releasing toxic smoke, even though I'd used it for decades, and it passed every local code. She passed new rules, faster than anyone could read them. No porch decorations, no unapproved paint colors. All dogs required HOA registration with vet records from her personal list of approved animal professionals. And just for me, a quiet hours policy that conveniently outlawed coffee on my porch before 9 a.m. Coincidence, Biasa? Not even close. But I didn't flinch. I documented everything, every decibel, every rule, every change. I took photos, time-stamped them, logged each noise complaint with exact precision. And when I called her, she'd hang up, then crank the music louder. When I sent complaints to the HOA board, Chairman Henderson, her buddy Rodri's golf partner, dismissed them with a shrug. Said Vivian was enhancing community value. Enhancing? She painted part of my cabin neon yellow. I walked outside one morning and nearly fell over. A whole corner of my hand-carved porch looked like a radioactive banana. She stood next to the painters, sipping coffee from a glittery mug, and said, "Oops, my bad. I'll fix it later." She never did. Then came the cameras, big, ugly, black security cameras mounted on her roofline, angled directly at my windows, bedroom, living room, porch. It wasn't security, it was surveillance. And still, I held the line, but I could feel it. The toll creeping in. My appetite faded. I jumped at noises, stopped sitting outside. I stared at Emily's photo every night, wondering, was I just being stubborn? Should I move on? Would she want me to? But then I'd hear her voice. The last thing she ever said to me in that hospital bed. Ted, never let anyone push you off land that carries your soul. Promise me you'll fight. So I did. I called Peyton, an old friend, my lawyer, the man who helped me through Emily's passing. He picked up on the first ring. And when I told him Vivian had built part of her luxury pool on my land, he paused, then said, Ted, we're about to give her a legal nightmare. And just like that, the quiet, grieving man she tried to bulldoze was gone. What was left was an engineer with a plan. Part 3. The map, the mistake, and the pool of lies. Peyton's office was exactly as I remembered. Stacks of case files teetering like unstable towers, law books with cracked spines, and a smell, old paper and burnt coffee, that somehow made me feel safe. I laid the folder down on his desk, the one labeled Harrington Deed, 1914, to present. He opened it slowly, carefully, like it might contain dynamite, and in a way, it did. 30 minutes later, he looked up with wide eyes and whispered, Ted, they built that pool on your land. He traced the old maps, the survey coordinates, the boundary markers that were misaligned during a 1960s county update. That error, never corrected, meant every modern record was off by several feet. And those few feet, they meant 40% of Vivian's pool, the most expensive parts, were sitting squarely on my soil. The filtration system, the waterfall feature, even the poolside kitchen, all trespassing, all illegal. And it got worse. Vivian hadn't just been entitled, she'd been criminally careless. Peyton found documentation that Rosewood Corp., her family's company, had submitted false tax records, undervalued property assessments, and forged signatures on permit forms. Then came the environmental bombshell that they hadn't tested the soil, they hadn't filed proper disposal plans, and according to whistleblower reports, Vivian had ordered the crew to bury chemical containers beneath the pool, paint thinners, solvents, lead-based waste, all of it hidden just feet away from the groundwater supply that fed our entire valley. That stream behind my cabin, where Emily used to sit with a book and a lemonade, contaminated. Peyton's team ran independent tests, and the results, 10 times over EPA limits. I felt the blood drain from my face. This wasn't just property theft anymore, it was public endangerment. Federal-level stuff. The kind of disaster that makes headlines. And indictments. And as if the universe wanted to underscore the threat. That same afternoon, I looked out my cabin window and saw Vivian again, standing by the western edge of her pool, pointing, shouting, commanding another construction crew. They were digging again, right at the boundary. And I knew. She had no idea how close she was to setting off a legal explosion. I called Peyton, told him everything I saw. He paused, then said quietly, "It's time." We hit back, all at once, from every angle. That night I couldn't sleep. I stood on my porch, coffee in hand, Emily's chipped mug warm against my palms. The air was still, cold, somewhere down the hill. Music played from Vivian's pool party, but my eyes weren't on the noise. They were on the stars. And for the first time in months, I smiled. Not out of bitterness, but because I knew justice was coming. Part 4. The whistleblower, the arrest, and the war that went federal. Her name was Casey. Just a kid, really. Maybe mid-20s, with tired eyes and dirt still under her fingernails. She was the site supervisor for Vivian's pool construction, and the one who finally snapped. I got the message late one night, encrypted, anonymous, but the subject line hit me like a brick. I know what she buried. We met at a diner, on the edge of town. The kind of place where coffee never gets cold and no one asks questions. She slid into the booth like she was being followed. Her hands trembled as she whispered, "She told us it was temporary. Just until the disposal trucks came." But they never came. Lead-based paint, industrial solvents, containers with orange warning labels buried beneath the concrete shell of her pool. 12 of them, she said, voice cracking. She wanted it cheap and fast. Said the old man would never know. I didn't say anything. I just handed her a business card with Peyton's name on it and said, "You just became the most important person in this valley." Casey became our whistleblower. Under full legal protection, she handed over everything. Hidden camera footage, blueprints with fake permit stamps, audio recordings of Vivian saying things like, "Once the old guy's gone, this land becomes ours. Trust me, the law's on our side if we outlast him." The more we uncovered, the deeper the rot went. False tax records, forged permits, waste chemicals leaking into a stream that served 2,000 residents. Vivian wasn't just a tyrant in high heels. She was a walking environmental crime scene. But it didn't stop there. She must have sensed we were closing in, because suddenly, she turned my world upside down. She filed charges against me: harassment, trespassing, intentional emotional distress. She claimed I'd poisoned her water, that I was a dangerous old man with a vendetta. And the worst part? She had video footage, edited, cropped, out of context. It showed me near her property with water collection vials, gathering samples for the EPA. She posted it online with a caption that read, "Disturbed man tries to sabotage our pool. Pray for our safety." It went viral. And while the neighborhood gossiped behind closed doors, I was arrested. For the first time in my life, I spent a night behind bars. The cell was cold, the mattress paper thin. And as I stared at the ceiling, I wondered, is this what it takes to protect a legacy? Then, just before dawn, Officer Reynolds, the same man I once taught traffic safety classes with, walked in with a cup of coffee. He didn't say much, just placed the cup in my hands and murmured, "Hang in there, Ted. Good people always get hit the hardest, right before the truth comes out." And that morning, it did. Because when I stepped out of the station, Peyton was waiting with a grin. He leaned in and whispered, "She made a mistake, the kind that breaks empires." Part 5, the legal strike, the pool party, and the first shockwave. The very next morning, we launched it. Peyton and his team a dream squad of legal minds hit every front at once. A federal lawsuit demanding emergency injunction over the land Vivian trespassed on. A complaint to the EPA with full documentation of groundwater contamination. An IRS referral exposing years of tax fraud. And a formal request to the FBI for potential RICO charges. This wasn't just about a pool anymore. This was a reckoning. Sarah Martinez, environmental attorney. Robert Chen, forensic accountant. David Thompson, retired FBI. Names that struck fear into corporate boardrooms. Were now laser-focused on Pinewood Valley and Vivian Rosewood. And while that firestorm built behind the scenes, Vivian? She threw a party. Not just any party, the Pinewood Valley Community Appreciation Pool Extravaganza. Invitations were delivered in gold-embossed envelopes. Live Beatles cover band, filet mignon, fireworks at sunset. It wasn't a party. It was a declaration. And I watched it all from my window, alone, in the dark. Hundreds of neighbors clapping, laughing, eating lobster tails by a glowing illegal pool. Then she stepped up to the mic, in that sequined crop top. With a champagne glass raised high, she said, "We must protect our beautiful neighborhood from threats from bitterness, from those who can't let go of the past. The crowd roared, and I just gripped my coffee mug, Emily's mug. I didn't cry, I didn't rage, but something inside me locked into place, because while she celebrated, Peyton handed me a document, a restraining order. Vivian had filed it overnight, claiming I was unstable, dangerous, that I shouldn't be allowed within 150 feet of her property. It passed, signed by a judge with close ties to the Rosewoods. And just like that, I was banned from standing on land I legally owned. That night, my cabin went dark, literally. Vivian arranged a surprise inspection of my utilities. Electricity, cut, water, disconnected. Then came the garbage trucks, conveniently dumping waste all over my front yard. Within hours, she filed a health complaint against me. I sat in my silent, freezing cabin, no lights, no heat, no water, holding Emily's photo with trembling hands, not from cold, but from despair. For the first time, I almost gave up. But then, through the night air, I heard the pool party laughter echoing across the pines, mocking, loud, triumphant, and I remembered Emily's voice, in her hospital bed. When someone tries to crush you, don't run, plant your feet, stand tall, and show them exactly who they're messing with. And right then, I knew. Vivian's celebration, it was premature, because by dawn, she was going to wake up to something far more shocking than any firework. Part 6, the raid, the robe, and the smile she didn't see coming. The sun hadn't even cleared the ridge, but Pinewood Valley was already wide awake. The rumble started slow, then grew louder, heavier. By 6:45 a.m., a convoy rolled into the cul-de-sac. EPA trucks marked with hazmat symbols, fire department engines, county inspectors, unmarked FBI sedans, and 4 local police cruisers. They didn't knock. They didn't ask. They surrounded the Rosewood estate like it was a cartel compound. And then, she came out. Vivian, pink silk robe, hair in curlers, holding a steaming mug, probably imported, and a confused little frown on her face like she'd just been disturbed during a spa massage. I stood across the property line, on my porch, coffee in hand, wrapped in my old sweater, watching it all unfold. When she spotted me, her eyes narrowed, her jaw clenched. But before she could speak, one of the EPA agents in a full hazmat suit stepped up to her, clipboard in hand. Calm, clinical. She said, "Ma'am, this entire facility is now a federally contained hazardous zone." Vivian blinked. "Excuse me?" The agent didn't flinch. "You are currently standing atop illegal toxic waste, buried beneath a structure that's also built on trespassed property. You'll need to step back immediately." For a split second, I swear, Vivian's knees buckled. And me? I finally smiled. Not a polite smile, not a smug one either. Just the kind Emily used to call my quiet justice face. I sipped from her chipped mug, looked straight at Vivian, and said, "Beautiful morning, isn't it?" That was only the beginning. Sarah Martinez, our environmental attorney, arrived next. Her team began scanning soil and water. The EPA confirmed severe contamination, levels of chlorine, bromine, and solvents that exceeded federal safety standards by over 900%. And the paperwork? Oh, we brought all of it. Original deeds, surveys, signatures spanning a century, filed, stamped, certified. Vivian tried to argue, said it was a setup. But when the forensic accountant revealed that Rosewood Corp. Had underreported their property value by nearly $200,000 a year, she went pale. Then the municipal inspector stepped up. Multiple code violations, unpermitted drainage systems, improper electrical lines near water structures. You didn't just bend the law, Mrs. Rosewood. You shattered it. And just when she looked like she might pass out, another bomb dropped. Casey, the construction supervisor, arrived. Damasabath, escorted by federal marshals, with a USB drive in hand, photos, videos, audio, all showing Vivian giving direct orders to bury toxic containers during the pool construction. And in that moment, Vivian Rosewood, HOA tyrant, pool queen, clipboard empress, realized this wasn't a dispute anymore. This was a federal case. Part 7, the offer, the threat, and the truth she couldn't hide. Vivian wasn't used to losing. So when her pool was locked down, her party ruined. Her name suddenly whispered like a curse through Pinewood Valley. She did what all bullies do when cornered. She switched tactics. That afternoon, while the hazmat crew worked, she showed up at my porch. No robe this time, no sunglasses, just a woman with shaky hands and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mr. Harrington," she began, voice sweet, too sweet. "I think we got off on the wrong foot." I didn't reply. She took a breath and pushed a folder toward me. Inside, an offer, 7 times the appraised value of my land. "Let's put this behind us," she said softly. "No lawyers, no headlines, just a clean slate." I looked at the number, then at her, and shook my head, slow and firm. She blinked. 10 times? I didn't speak, just gently slid the folder back into her manicured hands, and that's when her eyes changed. Gone was the sweetness. Her jaw clenched, her nostrils flared, and in a low hiss she growled, "You think this is over? You think that smile of yours means you've won?" I didn't flinch, but in my chest, I felt the echo of Emily's calm strength. Then came her last card. Vivian privately hired investigators, not to find truth, but to dig dirt. They started tailing Peaton, my lawyer, photographing his house, trying to frame him with rumors, fake scandals, threats to his license. But that was her mistake, because in desperation, Casey spoke up again. Under full immunity, she sat down with federal agents and dropped the biggest truth bomb yet. Vivian had always known. From the beginning, she knew about the boundary dispute, knew the permits were shaky, knew what she was burying under that pool. Her entire plan was to wait me out. She told her crew, on tape, "The old man won't live forever. If he doesn't file a claim soon, it all becomes ours by law. Adverse possession, look it up." She smiled when she said it. A cold, calculated smile. That pool, that mansion, that HOA reign of terror, it wasn't just greed, it was a plan, a strategy built on hoping I'd die quietly. But I didn't. I stood up, I fought back, and now the mountain was coming down on her. Part 8, the collapse, the confession, and the fire. She set herself from that moment on. It wasn't just my fight anymore. The town began to change. Neighbors who once waved politely but kept their distance started knocking on my door, started apologizing, quietly, sincerely. They'd been tricked, lied to, bribed with gift baskets, fancy wine, and promises of rising property values, all while Vivian waged psychological war behind closed gates. Even HOA Chairman Henderson, the one who once called her a pillar of the community, resigned in disgrace. Turns out, he'd been receiving consulting payments from Rosewood Corp., thousands funneled through shell companies, in exchange for looking the other way. But Vivian? She wasn't done falling. One midnight, I heard it again, Heavy machinery, metal scraping, voices, muffled, hurried, coming from the pool site. I peeked through the pines, and there she was, Vivian Rosewood, in all black, directing a crew of men in unmarked uniforms, hauling barrels, evidence. She was trying to erase everything. Toxic waste containers, falsified documents, even pieces of the filtration system. I grabbed my phone, called the EPA's emergency enforcement line, called the police. They responded fast, faster than I'd ever seen. By the time agents arrived, Vivian was caught red-handed, mid-command, trying to pump chemical runoff into the storm drain. Hazmat suits surrounded her. Photos were taken, evidence bagged, and Vivian, she was arrested, on the spot. Obstruction of justice, environmental sabotage, tampering with federal evidence, and suddenly, that silk robe and Maserati meant nothing. She was just another criminal. In cuffs. Over the following weeks, it all unraveled. Federal investigators traced a massive web of violations. Property tax fraud, illegal construction permits, environmental crimes, financial coercion of residents, and most damning of all, falsified deeds aimed at stealing my land. The pool was condemned. The EPA ordered it dismantled completely. 12 feet of contaminated soil had to be excavated, treated, replaced with clean earth. Vivian was banned from building, selling, or leading any HOA in the state for 15 years. And in the court of public opinion, she lost far worse than her mansion. She lost everything. But even then, I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel revenge. I just stood on my porch, staring at the empty hole where that flashy pool used to be. And I felt something else entirely. Peace. Part 9. The legacy. The park. And the promise I kept after the dust settled, and the lawsuits were signed, and Vivian was officially convicted on multiple federal charges. I had a choice to make. The court gave me the green light to demolish the entire pool area, erase every trace of what she built, and reclaim the land that had always been mine. But as I stood there, looking at the empty foundation, the scar in the earth where a war once raged, I thought of Emily. And I thought of what she would have wanted. Not revenge, not destruction, but healing. So, I did something no one expected. I walked into the courtroom one last time and made a request. Let me transform this site into something good. I asked for the contaminated pool area to be rebuilt, not as a luxury installation, but as a community environmental education center. Playgrounds made with safe, recycled materials. Nature trails with signs about conservation and groundwater protection. A garden, built in Emily's honor, blooming where toxins once lay buried. The judge approved it. And 18 months later, on a crisp Colorado autumn morning, golden leaves swirling in the breeze, I sat on my porch, coffee in hand, watching dozens of children laughing, running across the grass where chemical drums once hid. No more parties, no more screaming bass lines, just birdsong and the sound of joy. The center was named after her, the Emily Harrington Environmental Education Park. Her name etched into polished wood for every generation to see. And me? I kept my routine. Same chipped mug, same wraparound porch, only now. When I looked out across the valley, I saw something she would have loved. A community, stronger than fear, cleaner than greed, and finally, truly united. I whispered to the wind, "We did it, sweetheart. We turned poison into purpose." Epilogue. The photograph, the porch, and the peace. We fought for seasons have turned again. The pines whisper softer now. The wind carries laughter instead of lawsuits, and the old cabin, weathered but proud, still stands at the heart of it all. Every morning I sit on the porch, same spot where it all began, same chipped mug, steam curling in the mountain air, birds singing above the garden that now blooms brighter than I ever imagined. There's a new bench down near the trailhead, carved from cedar, engraved with a name that still makes my chest ache. Emily. Children gather there. Teachers read stories about clean water, native plants, little hands planting seeds where concrete once poisoned the ground. Sometimes, I still hear her voice, soft, amused, warm. Told you not to let them push you off the porch, didn't I? I chuckle, because she was right. They tried. Oh, they tried everything. Noise, threats, lies, legal tricks, and toxic silence. But in the end, truth held the line. The land stayed with its rightful soul. And from one man's stubborn refusal to back down, a whole town finally woke up. Vivian? She left the state. Early release, minimum security, granted only under the condition she keep paying toward the restoration fund. She lives in silence now. Far from the lights, the glitter, the noise she once ruled over. And me? I've got what matters. A porch, a view. A community rebuilt not on fear, but on respect. And every time I sip that first cup of coffee, I glance toward the photo in the window, Emily smiling in the sunlight, her eyes forever reflecting the mountains she loved. I whisper, "We protected it, Em, and somehow we made it even more beautiful." Because sometimes the greatest victory isn't revenge, it's leaving behind something worth loving, for everyone.